you playing?
Hello, and welcome to What the Bleep Are You Playing? A podcast where we play a game many times bad and tell you why the bleep we played it. I'm Spider Sean. This is X Thomas and Mason, who's stuck in the water level. And we played... Spider-Man and X-Men in Arcade's Revenge.
This game can go to hell.
Mason's bad at this game.
So,
This game can go straight to hell and never return.
we have really introduced, with my last two games, Mason to the Super Nintendo NES era of games are hard. They're really hard.
Yeah, everyone who's like, oh, video games were better in my day, shut up. No, they weren't. This game makes me want to go cry, suck my thumb, and go back to the Xbox One.
So, as Baby Mason is going to be throwing a tantrum here, Thomas and I will have a discussion.
This is going to be two people having an intelligent conversation and me screaming in the corner.
I want to play.
I don't want my dick kicked in.
I want save states.
So,
I want more than 3 fucking lives and going back to the beginning.
Oh, man.
this game
But Mason
is known for being really hard.
Mason does have a point. This game is
It's hard as
to
balls.
be blunt. It's very hard.
It's very hard. It is known for being hard. It is that unforgiving NES, Super Nintendo side-scrolling platforming game where it's sometimes... Well, I don't want to say less about skill because it does take a lot of skill, but it's more about having everything memorized and knowing where you're going to get through it.
And look, I'm not saying that if you like these kind of games, that is your cup of tea, that's fine. I have the attention span of a goddamn toddler, so
Yeah.
I'm not about to spend weeks of my life memorizing this game.
Yeah. And
I got shit. I got stuff to do, man. I can't be memorizing video games.
so this game came about as two companies, both that made a lot of licensed games, came together to make this game. The company that developed it, Software Creations, developed tons of licensed games. We were looking through it. They had like 6 games in '92 alone when this came out.
Software Creations could just describe any video game developer.
Well, it's funny, when they became the second, after they changed their names, they just became Creations. They dropped the software and made a couple games before
This game
closing
is,
down.
This game is a creation by who? Creation. That's what I said. No.
And then the publisher was...
LJN.
LJN, there we go. So that made lots of.
They're known in infamy for the amount of bad licensed games. Just a couple off the top of our head: Bill and Ted, the Addams Family games, fucking Wayne's
Bill and
World,
Ted.
Wayne's World, Back to the Future. Any licensed game on the NES that was critically panned, it was usually an LJN game.
Yeah, but also this podcast was founded on the idea of we need to talk more about licensed games.
Yeah, that was
And
part
so-
of it. And sadly, that also leads us to games like this.
So
I don't like this game.
yeah, Mason's going to be the Debbie Downer on this
I'm
game.
the negative Nancy. I'm the naysaying Nelly. I don't like this game.
Fair enough.
Because it's hard.
It's hard. That's why. But for those of us who can appreciate a sophisticated,
Hey, it's like a wine tasting. Get it? Wine.
This game...
We get a taste of my whining, alright.
This game makes people whine, including me. What the fuck?
Yeah. it does that thing that a lot of NES and Super NES, specifically platformers, did, where they just drop you in and say, good luck.
Is it? Yeah, here's the game, go.
But unlike things specifically like Mega Man, where each step of those first levels is to, like, teach you how to play the game, without, like, telling you they're teaching you how to play the game, this, just is like, hey, good luck. You have buttons, figure it out.
Okay, you brought up Mega Man, and the best way I can use to describe it is, in Mega Man, you pick your level, you play it, and once you beat all 6 or 8 levels, depending on which game you're playing, you go to Wily Castle, where it tests all your abilities at once. This only feels like the Wily Castle, with none of the build-up.
Yeah.
So,
for being Spider-Man and the X-Men, if you take forever, like we did on the first level, it's like, wow, where are my X-Men at? Where are my X-Men at? I want to play the X-Men. Because the first Spider-Man level is you having to run around and disable these
it says
buttons.
Disable, collect, whatever. You're disabling these security cams that the Villain Arcade has set up.
Here's an accurate description of the first level in this game. That's the first level of this game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of backtracking. There's a lot of climbing. And it's trying to utilize Spider-Man's abilities. Wall climbing, swinging, shooting webs. And I think legitimately all of those are fine. Like, all those abilities that Spider-Man feels fine.
Yeah, the controls in this game are not the problem. The main problem of this game, and we'll probably talk about it more in depth later, the main problem with this game is the goddamn level design.
Yeah.
The level design in this game is atrocious.
I won't say atrocious, but it's like...
It's
so odd, like the direction they went.
No, I
what is good...
I don't even find it odd, it's flat out bad.
I disagree. But the thing about it is... it's
disagreeing with Mason. Wow, what an episode. We've never had this happen before.
It's never been a thing.
Hello, Van Helsing Part 2. But the thing about this game is its level design... On the surface, it's not a problem. Like, whatever, you have... Especially the first one, you have tubes, you have to go back and forth and go through it. But none of them feel like they're actually... It doesn't feel like you're going anywhere with it. Like, I'm going to use Metroid as an example that has level design very similar to this. Is you'll go down one way, and you'll find a dead end. Oh, well, I can't get through there, so I'm going to go backtrack. I'm going to go, oh, I got that item. Cool, now I can go through this area now. That's what it feels like it's trying to be, but without the item collection, without the reward system without it, it's just It's trying to take what's good about those games without actually doing what's good about those games.
It kind of makes me think that what this game probably should have done, what I think it was trying to do, was be a full Metroidvania.
Yes.
And you start as Spider-Man, but your power-ups are the different X-Men. So, well, I can't get through this wall as Spider-Man. Well, you find Wolverine and he can claw through the wall. I can't shoot that fucker as Spider-Man. Okay, find Cyclops, he can shoot that guy. Mm-hmm. I can't go into the water. Storm!
Yeah, the Storm's first level is just her swimming, and I didn't know we needed Storm as Echo the Dolphin, and I'm pretty sure still at this point we didn't need that.
So, I mean, a little bit of credit, I guess. I don't know if developers at this time were aware of how much water levels sucked, or at least were aware of how other people would react to water levels and how they suck.
Well, I mean, the internet didn't exist back then.
The internet didn't exist.
Or it did, but not to the extent
we're also
at
this point...
The modern internet
we're up
exist,
through...
Yes.
At this point, 92, we're up to Mario Bros. 3 at this point?
Would World have come...
I don't think World had come out yet.
So I looked up Echo the Dolphin. Just to see what year it came out. It came out the same year as this.
So Echo the Dolphin copied X-Men.
Yeah, it came out the same year as this. December 23rd. Echo the Dolphin came out on my fucking birthday.
And a month after this game. So this game truly came first.
This game really did.
Echo the Dolphin copied this game. But
Sega, call your lawyers.
But
call your lawyers and defend this property you haven't used since the Genesis.
Echo the Dolphin's a very weird game. But that's a completely other tangent. I think we'll follow up here on Mason's thing. I think a lot of this game, and yeah, you don't have the internet, so you don't have as much immediate feedback other than sales and, what you do in test audience and things like that. But a lot of this game is, what you like in games, so we're going to make that. People like backtracking because they get Metroid-type games, or, the first Zelda had been out, or Castlevania, or Mega Man, things like that do have some backtracking. Oh, but there's no real reward system. You like powers, cool, but the powers are just kind of there to go through things. They're not necessarily rewarding it. So instead of, if it had just been a straightforward platformer a la Mario at that time, cool. I think there's a lot more things, but it's still so much an arcade game that the frustrating part of it is that you don't have a feel of reward. Honestly, you only kind of a lot of times have a feel of dread because there's also not a lot of lives to pick up to help you. There
really aren't.
In certain parts you can get where there are a lot of hearts to help your health. Specifically, like the Cyclops levels and the later on the Spider-Man levels have tons of hearts as you go through it, but they don't have extra lives. So it's like, hey, I die 3 times and I'm starting over again. Which again, that was a big thing at the time. Arcade type games, not uncommon, but it's something that a few years later we would kind of move past.
The thing is that the reason a lot of these games were designed this way back then to be hard as fuck is because they didn't want you beating it in a weekend.
Yeah.
Because then you could just rent it. So the reason why a lot of these games are designed as hard as they are is because you can beat this game in like an hour if you're good enough. They didn't want you to be good enough. So they designed the games to kick your fucking ass so you couldn't just beat it in a weekend and you had to actually buy it.
And a lot of times, now people had big libraries, but again, your average person had 4, 5, 6, 7 games. So when you chose a game, you were going to stick with it for quite a while.
Yeah, so...
So what you're saying is that video game developers at this time actively hated game rental stores.
I mean, not necessarily because they made money off of it, but you did want them to buy it.
Not despised, but not exactly loved either.
Because there's a lot of like this element of now is like when we get bigger and games would expand and stories would be being told, and you're sitting, and especially games with saves, and you're sitting down and playing big expansive stories, things. Whether it's big things like RPGs like Final Fantasy or Star Ocean or Phantasy Star or Dragon Quest in Japan, or you would have things like the Mario games on the Super Nintendo World, Yoshi's Island, or the Donkey Kong Country games. You're not sitting down and usually beating those in one afternoon unless you're just, stupid good. And even then, you probably weren't when you bought it. So, like, you might rent those games to try out, but a lot of these sort of games, you're not necessarily... If you're renting to try out, you're probably not going to buy it afterwards, is a lot of it. So there's that aspect of this early time that, like, rental, you're renting or you're playing arcade games to sit down with your friends and play quickly and things like that. Whereas you're not necessarily, the longevity is in how hard they are. And so Thomas is right. It's not even necessarily just rent. It's that's how you expand a 1 hour game into people playing it for, 50, 60, 70 hours of their, of their time.
It's something that we've thankfully moved past to a certain extent, where the games were artificially long and artificially hard. Mm-hmm. So, which is the best way I can kind of describe this game. It's not hard in a sense where it's satisfying to beat.
Yes.
It's artificially hard because they just throw so much shit at you. It's not ghosts and goblins bad or whatever, but it's one of those things where, in other games, say the first Castlevania, that game is hard as the dickens. But once you beat it, you get like this fist pump feeling like, yeah, I did it. This game, I more just felt kind of a sigh of relief whenever...
Or even something like we just played, Battletoads and Double Dragon. Hard game. Battletoads is hard, but you do feel a sense of accomplishment when you beat things. And also because their multiplayer aspect, the team-up aspect of, okay, we're going to do this together, that because you had Spider-Man and the X-Men, if one of people was playing Spider-Man and one was X-Men and you were going through levels, I think there is something that actually may have been more rewarding for how hard it is.
Yeah, it's odd this wasn't a beat 'em up because, yeah, platformers were a big superhero thing, but
Beat 'em ups were really big, especially
Beat 'em ups
arcade
became-
styles.
the big superhero games, like, I mean, to be fair, not maybe some of them weren't out at this time. I haven't looked it up, but like Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, the X-Men arcade game.
Well, I mean, Maximum Carnage is the studio made this a couple years later. The same studio that made this game made Maximum Carnage, which is a great game. So yeah, you think about it when you're like, wow, they made Maximum Carnage. So the game they made before Spider-Man's a beat 'em up? It's not.
Yeah.
Huh.
What year did he say this one?
92.
Okay, so this was the X-Men arcade game was also 92, but it was March.
So yeah, X-Men Arcade. So they probably would have been developing
January
again.
in Japan, and then
Games
March worldwide.
for the Super Nintendo and NES did not have a long development cycle sometimes.
No,
So
at
that's why a studio could, crap out 6 games in a year.
Yeah, there was.
I thought we were past that by this point.
The longest development cycle for the SNES that I can think of. There are some that were probably longer, but the longest one I can think of was 6 months.
I mean, I think Final Fantasy VI, albeit again nearing the end of the SNES cycle, was
So it's
a
really
year or so
pushing.
long.
So it's
Super
really
Mario RPG, I know, had a long development cycle. So RPGs sometimes, but those are also games that you're going to spend 25, 30 hours playing the actual game, and not like, an hour. Not to say that this game was designed shoddily or quickly. It's to say that like you're designing more of a bigger world in those ones versus, contained, what is this, 10 levels?
Let's see. There's the beginning and the end with Spider-Man.
So 12 levels then, yeah.
Yeah, because 5 to 10.
Yeah,
beginning.
12 levels. It isn't artificially expanded is kind of the best way to describe this in terms of its hard level, its level of difficulty.
Yeah, I don't think this game is atrocious or anything, but I do kind of feel bad for little kid loves Spider-Man the animated series, loves X-Men the animated series, decides buy this with its allowance money and just gets kicked in the balls.
Yeah, but also I think, and we'll get to this when we get to the final questions, a lot of it, but I do think that this is very fitting in that era that people, this is what you sought out a lot of times. It wasn't until later that you're like, oh yeah, they can be more, things like when you had Mario World, which,
I mean, Mario
they're more rewarding, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Mario World did come out before that.
Was it out before?
In Japan, it was 1990, North America 1991,
Okay.
Australia 1992.
Okay, so Mario World had come out, but that is that sort of thing that changed. But I guess we're still a year. The game changing until Donkey Kong was 94?
I believe so.
So
it's also
is when the game really changed.
It's also Nintendo did make this. Nintendo made Mario World, and they knew their system, and they also probably weren't making 6 games a year.
Yes,
This studio was, so
that does do a whole lot.
I don't think this, like I said, I don't think this game's atrocious. I don't think it's god awful, but it is one of those things where there's definitely those flaws, and you definitely see them. So
before we jump into some of the other stuff on it, I'll bring up and talk about one of the things that I really do love about this game. I really like the art style. I love the way it looks. Again, 92, so things like I like Spider-Man's look. Wolverine only has 2 claws, but I really like the the color choices they made for him. Cyclops, actually, I like the way he looks. Gambit is fine, but it's the animated series Gambit, and I'm not always as in love with the animated series.
It's mostly the animated series designs, except for Cyclops has a bunch of white on his costume for some reason,
which I kind of liked.
I kind of dug it.
Yeah, he's a lighter color, and I kind of like that than the really dark blue that he consistently is.
And then Wolverine, instead of his yellow tights, they gave him his brown ones, which I like his brown colors a bit more. But
Wolverine, my favorite color for Wolverine is the orangish color. That when they put him in that orange look,
like Evolution.
Yeah, Evolution. That's one of my favorite. That dark brown orange is one of my favorite looks for Wolverine.
It's a great looking game, but at the same time, it's like being punched in the face by an attractive person. Yeah, they're attractive, but you're mad because they're punching you in the face.
You're not saying thank you? Can I have another?
No.
Bullshit.
No.
May I have some more, please?
Didn't expect to get called out like that.
But let's go ahead and jump into the gameplay here first. I know we've talked about a little bit of it, but
The target was lined up. I just had to
but it said 12 levels. Your first level is a Spider-Man level where you're doing those sort of things, and then you have 2 levels with each X-Men characters that you can select, which is cool that you don't have to go in a particular order.
Again, probably attempting to do something Mega Man did. But.
Yes. This game feels very much like, Mega Man and Metroid and Castlevania. It kind of feels like that's where it took a lot of its inspirations from. But you can then choose each of the X-Men have 2 levels, and you know, Wolverine, Gambit, Storm, Cyclops, and then Spider-Man has 2 levels.
Cyclops, by the way, they call him Slim in this game. Which was really weird for all of us, because we were like, wait a minute, when has he ever been called Scott
when's this
Slim
motherfucker been
Summers?
called Slim? Turns out,
Turns out that was his original name. It was Slim Summers, and then in issue 3, they're like, actually, it's Scott Slim Summers.
Right.
You think Scott made that name up himself, or was it given to him in high school or something?
It
then
feels
we get
like
to the
something-
X-Men Academy. It's like, hey, Slim. Oh, fuck.
That he tried out for a couple of weeks. He's like, yeah, everybody call me Slim. Call me Slim. That'll be cool. And they're like, no. And he's like, you're right, it's not cool.
Yeah,
I'm
and then
sorry.
2 weeks later, he's like, why'd I ask for that?
But I do think this is something, while, again, it's still really hard, it is really cool, that legitimately every character then has a very different type of level. Like, they'll kind of rotate through it in kind of what you're targeting in a lot of ways, but every character does feel different. Which is it is hard to do. Super Nintendo games, that is very hard to do in this sort of thing. And so, like, that is a credit here that they did put a lot of effort into each character.
Yeah, that's fair.
It is one of those things where Spider-Man, his abilities are only 3 buttons. Like, I pressed the A button God knows how many times, and it didn't do a thing. But Spider-Man can sling web, and he can shoot web from his wrist like a projectile, and he can jump. There you go.
And he can climb up walls.
Yeah, but that's not a button. That's just a thing
Yeah, I
he
know.
can do.
He's just exceptionally sticky boy.
He can swing on webs, not while jumping though.
Yeah,
that was annoying.
That's
That's
probably
weird.
my most frustrating thing
in terms of the game.
In terms of the gameplay, is that and it just. And just from a design idea, I know that maybe is harder to institute at the time, but like Spider-Man not being able to shoot web, either you shoot his swinging web while falling.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just something that they just couldn't get coded in, and it was the early coding that just didn't work. I don't know, but it just feels like something that you could still do at this time.
It's just one of those things where it's weird because, from a character perspective, Spider-Man misses his first. Spider-Man accidentally slips off his web, and instead of shooting another one, he just does the "guess I'll die" meme.
Yeah.
So,
there's also the element of like, from a platforming mechanic, being able to jump over gaps and be able to swing. You could actually widen the gaps. You could do more with it. It just feels like something that would fully round out the character in the game that just kind of feels lacking. And maybe it's just, again, it's 92. Maybe it's just something they couldn't program in at that time or whatever. It just felt a little weird considering that a lot of the Castlevania, specifically at the time, stuff felt like you could do all those sort of things with it.
And
or Metroid, definitely.
Yeah, and especially, I only bring up that Spider-Man doesn't use his 4 abilities because it feels like every other character does.
Yeah.
Like, I picked Wolverine next because I'm a whore.
Yes.
And
Thomas would have picked Wolverine first if he could have.
Oh, if I could have, yeah, absolutely. But I spent years. I'm like, he had a uppercut, he had a strike, and he had a jump. And I'm like, well, where's his claws? Turns out it's the A button. And I'm like, well, now wait a minute. Why doesn't Spider-Man get anything with the A button?
Yeah, that was weird. Wolverine has his claws. You attack a lot of characters. He does not have any projectile.
Which it's Wolverine.
But like all the other characters had a projectile, so there's part of thought that maybe he'd throw something in, pull out a gun and just shoot people.
Wolverine just packing.
But so a lot of
it's like Wolverine standing in front of himself. He's like, "I am you, and you are me, and this is a gun."
From the level designs, Wolverines are all up close. You're running, you're attacking things,
killing clowns,
which is my nightmare.
Because for some reason, each character has a theme. Spider-Man's is city, Gambit's is gambling. Cyclops' is mines for some reason.
Yeah, it was mines. Yeah.
Storm's is again underwater, which is weird as hell, and Wolverine's is circus. I don't see the relationship between any of those except maybe Gambit's and Spider-Man's.
Not just circus, but like demented toy factory.
Yeah, because there were like gangsters coming out of Jack and the Boxes. It's Jack and the Gangster.
And then in the second level, which we watched a bit of because we're not good enough to beat the level, we watched it though so we could see it there. You're running from Juggernaut, and like the clowns will pop up and like they'll pop through the walls, and it's just like, what? Who? It's creepy. It actually, I think, as far as like look wise, looks cool.
It's one of those things. I kind of wish there was a bit more story in this game.
Yes.
Not enough, but like maybe a little bit of cutscenes so they could explain the relationship. Because I think it'd be very funny if with Wolverine, Arcade was deliberately trying to fuck with him by putting him in like the cutesier levels. So it's like Batman in the Lego Movie where it's like, I hate this place.
Yeah, there is kind of like that element missing. Again, these sort of studios didn't really do a whole lot of story stuff with these games.
I'm not expecting it, but I'm just saying it would be kind of funny.
It would have been funny if there was a little bit more.
The only cutscenes in the game are the beginning one with Spider-Man, and I'm guessing there's one at the end. But I didn't look it up.
We're not good enough to see that.
Oh, there was also Arcade in the dungeon.
Oh yeah, in the dungeon.
That's right. That's right.
Holding the X-Men in his
holding the
dungeon.
X-Men hostage, which, like, this game nerfs Storm really bad, because at the same time, I'm looking, and all of the X-Men, I'm like, literally all of them could get out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing it's like one of those things where when they try to use their powers, they get electrocuted like a cartoon or something. But Wolverine, not to be blunt, has a healing factor. He could literally just rip his hand off. Cyclops could turn his head, shoot. Storm can control the weather, and Gambit can literally just touch them and they explode. So it's like, all these motherfuckers can get out.
Yeah,
this game does not need to happen.
Clearly, they just wanted to go into this weird. So it's less of like, I hate this place, more like, let me go back to the demented clown world. I need to face my nightmares.
Logan just needs to get some aggression out by killing the clowns.
I think not how you get your aggression out, by killing clowns?
Not exactly, no.
Huh.
The rest of the characters have different projectiles. Gambit throws cards, which was really cool. Like the Gambit level, you're running from like an Indiana Jones-esque boulder and throwing cards at enemies with the platforming. Honestly, cool. I actually like. Again, if I didn't die so quickly and then immediately have to play that Spider-Man level again, I probably would have played the Gambit level a bunch.
And gosh darn Spider-Man level.
But
which, for me, became like second nature.
Yeah, which I guess that's how you memorize that level so well, is because you were, I died 50 times today, and I played that Spider-Man level 50 times, so now I know where everything is.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess maybe if I had an afternoon with this game, I could beat it, but I don't care. So
it is that element. It's definitely one of those that, like, if you get good at it, you're going to beat it pretty quickly.
It's more a matter of time that you'll beat it, like all the memorization, but I don't know. Again, there's just nothing rewarding to beating it, so I'm like, I don't care enough to.
That's fair. So. That's kind of the biggest sticking point for me on that, is the reward feeling. Nothing like accomplishing things just feels like, okay, I did that. We mentioned earlier about the controls, but I personally thought the controls were pretty good, especially for some of these Super Nintendo games. The controls usually don't feel this good. So like, especially in like early 90s, non-beat 'em ups a lot of times just don't feel good. So
they're fine.
They're a little clunky, but only when you're Spider-Man. Which is weird that he's the main character of the game and he's
the clunkiest
the one
of them.
feels the worst.
The biggest complaint I'd have with the controls is sometimes they're just slow responsive.
Yeah.
Like there's things that's just like I'm hitting the button, I'm doing this, but when they work, they all work pretty good. Like everything feels solid. It's just implementing them, and I just don't like the thing that I don't like about it. The platforming's honestly fine in this game. Platforming, no problem. The enemies is the annoying part because they're hard to target. They're hard to figure out. There's no like upgrades that are like, oh, this is how I beat this enemy, Mega Man-esque type of thing.
No.
It's not that. It's just they're enemies. They're hard. You're having to time things out. And as we watched speedrunners and saw, to beat the game, you don't need to. You're just running through and not fighting the enemies, which is really weird for a superhero game.
And it's also very weird for, like you said, a Mega Man type game.
Yeah, this game is odd.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can describe it. I didn't want to die or whatever, but it was just one of those things where I'm like, what an odd game.
No, I did.
It really felt like it just needed some, tune-ups, but also some form of either reward or multiplayer action that would make it feel better.
Either go full beat 'em up or go full Metroidvania is the way I think too.
It's kind of in that weird in between.
The game.
Yeah, it's in that weird in between. But yeah, it's a game.
It's a bad game.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that because
I
again,
think it's just
it's a game of its time, and that's the biggest thing. Again, like this game was reviewed very well, 7s across the board.
It's like 7s.
It fit a lot of what games were at that time. You just were -11, Mason. So
no, this is more like a 3 for me. Thomas uses the word odd. I think if it was odd, it doesn't feel like. It doesn't feel like, I don't want to say.
You hate this game.
Excuses are the explanation. That doesn't feel like the right explanation. It's just bad. It's just bad.
I disagree. It's bad. It's just it's a style. It's a style, and there was a time when the style of games and video games in general was, hey, you're gonna grab it and you're gonna beat your head against the wall for hours, and that's what you're gonna do.
I just don't find that enjoyable.
Again, if you had been born in the era and the time and played video, you probably would have found it super enjoyable. Like that's the difference. It's an age thing more than anything. I feel like it's a thing where, when you were born, the GameCube was coming out. Like that's just that's a different level of things. So
it's really interesting just to see the clash of the generations here. As someone who's more in the middle, like I didn't grow up with like these kind of games, but I also didn't grow up with the super polished games that
you were still in the PlayStation era where they were in the in-between of trying to figure out where things were going.
Like, this is shit, but it's all I got, baby. So it's very interesting to just see the clash of the generations.
Yeah, and it's one of those that and that's the thing. Again, I'm not probably going to seek out this game very often. I'm not even going to call it a good game necessarily. I think it's a fine game. It is. It sets out what it meant to do.
There's a certain spectrum. There's great, good, fine, meh, bad, Jesus. This is more meh for me.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't hate myself playing it, but it was one of those things where it's like...
It's not the fun that Battletoads was. Yeah,
Battletoads Double Dragon was fun. There will be other side-scroller games we play that I will consider fun. Mm-hmm. This is one of those where I'm like, oh, Jesus.
It's one that, you really have to set out with a certain motivation to want to play this game.
Yeah,
but I do think it does get a lot of things right. It does, the characters do get, aside from Storm, which they get very wrong on a lot of levels. But everyone else, they do get a lot of it right. Like, they look good. Their moves all fit. Their movesets fit what they're trying to do. If you're trying to build a platform around it, it all fits. It's just... It's a game of its time, and that's kind of what's going to be its biggest sticking point. Is that time passed in the mid to late 90s? That time ended, and
we're sitting here in 2023.
Yeah, so. We're sitting here 31 years later. That time passed. It's in that style of game wasn't timeless. It wasn't Pac-Man. It wasn't Mario. It wasn't those arcade games that we think of, Donkey Kong. Galaga, Space Invaders, those sort of arcade games that like are timeless and playing. So if you didn't play those games in that era, or if you didn't grow up on it, I can see why you would be Mason. That is just like, why would I play this game? Which is going to then be a question as we go into, the next generation, next things like that. What type of games that we're playing now are people going to be like, why would I play this game anymore?
Yeah, live service games.
That's fair, because they won't be playable.
That's like, what? Man, bitch, we're still asking that like right now. But yeah, it's shit. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Happens. But on this podcast, we like to ask two important questions of every game that we play. The first is, and one that I think we've answered in the last little bit, but the first one is, how does this game hold up?
Well, remember when I put that scale of great to Jesus?
Yeah.
It's on that scale exactly where I said it's meh. I don't think it is not a game that I think holds up great or even that good.
No.
It holds up, I guess, all right, but at the same time, it's such a product of its times that it's like, ooh.
That's its big thing. It's a thing that if you were in the time, you're gonna play it, you're gonna have no problem, you're gonna be whatever. But it's a product of its time. It's one that the industry as a whole kind of passed, and so as I say, that is hard to hold up because it's not going to necessarily introduce new generations to this sort of game. It's not something that people are going to necessarily seek out, and as the younger you get, the less likely it is to hold up.
Yeah, it's.
So I'm going to say, kind of for me because of that, but also acknowledging that, like, for a lot of the public, this game probably, if a lot of those sites reviewed now, are they going to give it a 7 out of 10? No, they probably aren't. They're probably looking back and saying it's a 5.
Saying it's a 5, maybe even a 4, depending on how harsh they are. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. A lot of times when I think, how does it hold up, I look back at the reviews and see if they had the problems back then.
Yes.
They didn't with this one, which is why I say this doesn't hold up as well as, say, X2 Wolverine's Revenge. Because even though I honestly would probably play this one before I play that one, just because it's
also a very hard game.
It's shorter, and I'm not screaming my lungs out as much. With this one, it was reviewed well because this is what was known at the time. Whereas with X2, the complaints that we have today were the complaints they had back then. So
yeah. So yeah, I think this one probably it'll be pretty much a kind of meh hold up for me. I'm pretty sure Mason's gonna be like, never will hold up, worst ever.
Well, they already said no, so
it looks fine, but the visuals aren't enough for me to forgive it for its crimes.
Fair enough. The second question that we ask on this podcast: would you like to see a remake or a reimagining of this game in a modern setting?
Gee!
Remake, no, because I said this game, remaking it means you have to completely change what it is at its core, because that game just doesn't get made.
Yeah.
Could you reimagine this game into a more of a different sort of modern type platformer? Sure.
Honestly,
do I want it? I don't know.
I feel like Marvel at this point is kind of all over the place with their video games. We have the highs of Spider-Man and the Jesus of Avengers, which this game's better than that. So,
I've never played it, so I can't say.
Just trust me.
Yeah. Sadly, I was hyped for that Marvel Avengers game.
I wasn't. So imagine my enthusiasm and disappointment when it got bad reviews. Tangent about the Avengers game. I wasn't hyped for it because I didn't see what everyone else saw in the trailer, and was also like, oh my god, this trailer's great. I'm like, it looks fine. But I got into the hype because more and more people around me were getting hyped for it, and I'm like, okay, it could be good. Then I played it, and I'm like, why the fuck? Why did I give it?
Why did I not trust my intuition?
Yeah, but anyway, all of the games right now have something in common. Big budget. They're AAA. Which it's Marvel, I know you gotta do, but like, we need an in-between of the AAA Spider-Mans, Guardians of the Galaxy stuff, and the mobile shit.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, this is where I think a game like this would be reimagined. A beat-em-up. A beat-em-up, but starring, Spider-Man, X-Men, some of the street tier. Marvel characters. Throw Daredevil in there or something. Like a beat 'em up with the street level Marvel characters.
Punisher?
Yeah, Punisher. I don't like her, but you could throw in Elektra.
You definitely could, because you could have an alternate to Wolverine in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But yeah, throw in all these kind of characters. Make kind of a Shredder's Revenge-esque 2D beat 'em up with these Marvel characters. That's what I would do if my reimagining, and make Arcade the main villain, because he's really easy to have a main villain for a, no pun intended, arcade-style game.
Yeah,
so
you could easily do a lot of that, taking the story, taking the idea, but no, this game doesn't need to be, I guess if they wanted to drop it on the Super Nintendo store, cool, someone maybe would want to play it, they have a lot of games like it, so...
Well, it has save states, so now it can be like, damn it, load, damn it, load,
That's
damn
true,
it, load.
and when you'd have emulation save state, that actually might help it, so like remastering potentially, or just dropping it, fine. I don't really need a remake. The story's interesting and you could do stuff with it, and I'm always down for interesting ideas of collabing and crossing over and making stuff with licenses. Spider-Man and the X-Men together is interesting. Despite the attempts of many studios trying to cross them over in games over and over and again, this is one of the few times they actually did it.
Reminder of the canceled Spider-Man Wolverine game that was going to be a sequel to Web of Shadows. I'm still angry about that.
So there's room to reimagine something out of this concept, but I think pretty unanimously, I don't think any of us really are ever going to be clamoring for more from this. Even from the level of Mason hating it to me being like, it's fine type of thing. That there's not going to be any. None of us are clamoring, despite that, for a new game using this sort of thing.
Yeah, they dropped the ground-up remake on the next Nintendo Direct, and the response is, why the fuck?
That's Spider-Man and the X-Men Arcade's Revenge on the Super Nintendo.
I just realized that. What's he getting revenge for?
The X-Men did something to him. I don't know. Beat him. And was there an arcade episode in the animated series? And this is
probably, I don't know.
I bet that's what this is. Is like it's technically a sequel to that. Oh, but what do you guys think? Do you like this game? Do you like this style of game? Are you old? Are you young? And that would be very important to know the differentiation of what you would think of this game. Well, you can let us know by sending us an email to bleepyouplaying@gmail.com. That's bleepyouplaying@gmail.com. And if you'd like to torture Mason and have us play other games like this, well, you can tell us to play those games by subscribing to our Super Bleep Head tier over on Patreon. Patreon.com/whatthebleep. $15 a month, and we will play and or watch whatever you suggest for us, as long as it doesn't break the bank. And we'll be back next time.
Next time it's time to play the music, it's time to light the lights.
I liked it.